Hi, Mike Ballier here.
Great, thanks so much.
And just to let everyone know, we are now live on YouTube and the county portal.
Good morning, Supervisor Cortese. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Yes, Dave Cortese, District 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, John. Good morning, John. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Hello?
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, if you're there, would you like to do a quick mic check?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good morning. It's 9:27 a.m. and we are live on YouTube and the county portal. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Good morning, Christina. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Lori. Would you like to do a quick mic check? I am not hearing you.
Okay, how about this now?
There you go. Thanks very much. Good morning, Joe. Would you like to do a quick mic check? You are still muted.
Thank you. Good morning,
There
everyone.
you go. Thank you.
Now, let me ask the clerk if we are ready to call the meeting to order.
We are ready.
All right, thank you very much. I am Santa Clara County Supervisor Dave Cortese, and I'm joined by my colleague, our board chair, Supervisor Cindy Chavez. The two of us chair and co-chair or vice chair two of the board's committees, Finance, Government, and Operations Committee, which is the primary agenda today, but also the Children, Seniors, and Families Committee, where we both serve. And those two committees are noticed publicly as a joint meeting today and generally when we meet, just to comply with Brown Act requirements relative to multiple board members meeting at the same time. I want to deal with some housekeeping issues very quickly. We will have an opportunity for public comment shortly. This is, of course, a virtual meeting as allowed by the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, which was issued on March 17, 2020, during the pandemic, allowing us to meet in this manner. When we do public comment, of course, we're doing it a little bit differently than when we're in person. Written public comments may be submitted by email to boardoperations@cob.sccgov.org. Those comments will be distributed to the committee as quickly as possible. But if you're wondering when they'll show up online, sometimes that takes up to 24 hours on the website. Spoken public comments will be accepted through this teleconference meeting. To address the committee, click on the link above for the appropriate meeting to access access us. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you're familiar with everything on your Zoom screen. You will be asked, in order to speak, to enter an email address and name. The clerk requests that you identify yourself by name, as this will be visible online and will be used to notify you that it is your turn to speak. When I call upon you, or Vice Chair Chavez calls upon you to speak, when we call upon the item on which you want to speak, for example, item 3, item 4, and so on, when you hear your item come up, it's important to click on Raise Hand, which is in the Participants section of your screen. Click on Participants, you'll see Raise Hand. Click on Raise Hand, and that's how the clerk will then activate and unmute the speakers so that you can speak during your turn. We will be terminating the speaker's time. Immediately upon the lapse of time, you will be turned off or shut off. So please be aware of that. The time goes by quickly. Under public comment, general public comment, we typically have the time established according to the number of speakers. So that is laid out on the agenda. when there are 5 or fewer speakers, there's 3 minutes allowed. And when there are 6 to 14 persons addressing this under public comment, there's 2 minutes allowed typically, and then 1 minute if there's more speakers in the public comment than that. That said, we will establish a 2-minute maximum. I'll tell you what, I'm going to reduce that to 1 minute maximum for public comment on each of these special agenda items for discussion today, only because the presentations are going to take about 10 minutes each. We have a total of about 5 minutes for questions, comment, public comment, and so forth, in order to try to get this meeting complete in less than 2 hours. So 1 minute on each item, and depending on the number of speakers we have, we'll establish the time under public comment. So with that, the meeting is formally called to order, and I guess because we are online, I'll let the clerk establish the quorum by roll call.
Vice Chairperson Chavez. Present. And we have Chairperson Cortese.
Here.
Present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And do we have speakers under public comment?
We currently have 1 speaker ready for public comment.
All right, we'll move to public comment item 2, and the speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. And we'll go ahead and close off public comment at this time.
All right, our only speaker for public comment this morning is Melissa Willett. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak, and the timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, thank you. This is Melissa Willett, and I just wanted to encourage this committee to listen to the employees when it's considering the return to work policies and protocols. So the employees in all the departments across the county are the ones who are going to be doing the work, the ones that are going to be at risk when having interaction with members of the public, with each other, and during the return to work. And so I think it's imperative that the county have a set protocol for every department to be able to have routine employee interaction, and not just for consideration, but for implementation. So not just a surface level idea that it's okay to hear from the employees and ignore everything that they've requested. Examples are in the office of the assessor where I work. We've recently had a lot of concern returning to work, and the assessor's office pushed it forward to get as many people in floor at 70 West heading as possible. Of course, one of the employees came back testing positive for COVID, and it put a lot of other workers at risk, and now it's created a lot more problems. And as we had just followed other regulations as the public health department advised, social distancing, et cetera, and minimize the number of people in the office. The assessor's office currently requires if somebody is to go to the office, they have to be there a minimum of 8 hours versus the 4 hours in the office and 4 hours teleworking or other arrangements. So we need to remove the minimum number of 8-hour workdays if we're going to talk about rotating shifts, or we're going to talk about minimizing the number of people in an office. There's also the idea that telework for departments needs to be considered on a permanent basis for those that can, and not full-time telework, but 1 to 2 days a week or 1 to 2 days a pay period needs to be considered for every single department and actually implemented for the benefit of workers in the future, for the benefit of our climate, for the benefit of modernizing what Santa Clara County is as an employer. And we also need to allow high-risk individuals to telework. We know that we need to ramp up the contact tracers, and they'll be allowed to telework and do contact tracing, which is going to be pivotal going forward. And high-risk individuals in the assessor's office in every department that you hear today need to be allowed to telework and not be in the office to be at that unnecessary risk, and they can be utilized as a contact tracers. Again, specifically the assessor's office, the end of the roll deadline, June 30th, they will be at the lowest caseload, the lowest point of need after July 1st, when the need for the contact tracers is the most. So thank you so much for that information, for hearing my information, and I really do hope that they're implementing protocols to listen to employees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. As you know, the law doesn't permit us to respond or take committee action on this item on public comment because it's reserved for discussion of items that are not on the agenda, although in this case much of the comments we just heard are probably applicable to some of the later items that we're going to hear on the agenda. So hopefully there'll be an opportunity to get into some of that. That would conclude item 2. Colin, is that correct?
We did have one speaker arrive late.
Why don't we go ahead and hear that speaker under the circumstances? I fully understand what it means to arrive late on virtual meetings because I do it myself. So we'll go ahead and allow the one more speaker, and then we're going to close off public comment. I just want to make that clear. We're well into the meeting now, 10 minutes into the meeting, and this will be the last speaker under public comment.
Our final speaker is Adam. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yes, good morning. So calling to ask, is there any update on when our economy is going to open here in Santa Clara County, on when businesses will be able to open, on when we'll be able to go to church? It's been 3 months now, 3 months, a quarter of a year. And you folks, the supervisors, are not telling us anything. All you keep on telling us is it's up to the health director. There are plenty of counties here in California that are fully open. People are living their normal lives. Business people are doing their business. And here in this county, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on because in a population of almost 2 million people, we've had 150 deaths. Okay, in 3 months or 4 months, whatever it is. And you people just keep on dragging this. And then you don't want me to tell me this is not a political game? Are you serious? So I would like to get answers as to when our economy is going to open here in this county. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. That concludes public comment. We'll move now to item 3 and start getting into these various reports. Again, today has really been set up as a special meeting of FGOC, this particular committee, to receive reports related to, I'll put it in my own words, the capacity for service delivery of about a half dozen or so areas of the county, perhaps more than that. I guess when we get into this first report from the county executive's office by way of Miguel Marquez, we'll hear beyond just one department. But the idea is to begin further assessing the capacity of the county itself, the county government, to operate and deliver services under the current circumstances and looking ahead. So what we've done here, again, I mentioned it earlier, is I'm going to try to be as disciplined as possible about this, starting with your presentation, Mr. Marquez, but continuing through all of them, is to stick to a 10-minute presentation time frame. We're going to allow about 5 minutes for questions, comment, and anything that resembles direction. And I'm going to try to make sure that that includes public comment as well. We'll see what kind of demand we have on public comment. So, Mr. Marquez, item 3, this is a report from the Office of County Executive related to the provision of county services during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Cortese, and good morning, Supervisor Chavez. And let me see if I can figure out how to put on the screen here. Hopefully you can see the presentation here. So back in mid-March, a decision was made that we needed to comply with the health order. That there had already been some talk of health order by that point, but then there was the Monday, March 16th, schools were closing, and on the 17th, the new health order was taking effect. And so as a county organization, we needed to pivot. We knew that, and we sent out an email to department heads and asked them to identify what essential services they needed to continue to provide to the community, and then also to determine which essential employees needed to come to the work site versus other employees who could work from home or if absolutely necessary, be on paid administrative leave so that we could comply with the public health order. We quickly established a process to determine which services were essential, and that was each department head let us know what those were for them, and either Dr. Jeff Smith or myself would approve that plan of what are the essential services, and we worked through that with some departments. And then we went off and pivoted how we deliver services, and by midweek to end week, we had accomplished all of that, and it was truly an amazing experience, something I'm very proud of this organization for implementing so quickly. Going to the next slide, you see here's an overall picture of how our continuity of county operations has been structured. A decision was made early on to have myself to lead this, what we call the county COOP coordination. And you'll see right next to it, I'm working on that closely with the CEO admin team and with our deputy county executives to help provide support to departments. We also then established a COOP liaison, our continuity liaison, that is part of the EOC activation to make sure that those two areas are coordinated. We also work very closely with the Office of Public Affairs and the PIO team at EOC to push out information about county services. And then finally, we put a lot of effort into communicating with staff many of whom are no longer coming into the office but are working from home. And so we have what we call the bridge and other communication vehicles to keep everyone informed to the best of our ability of what's going on. Next slide, you see that we have sort of an internal and an external strategy. Internally, we have regular reports and we have regular COOP calls that happen every week to hear about essential and non-essential functions and to work on determining policies and processes for the safe reopening in accordance with the health officer's orders and with best practices. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides, but essentially we have a team in place that is already thinking about reopening in accordance with the health order sometime in the future when that's appropriate. And then externally, in the meanwhile, we have regular updates that are posted on our county homepage with information for the public about the services that are available and how to access them. We have information about COVID-19 and service delivery. And then, of course, we have a strategy that involves Facebook, social media, town halls, and everything else. Let me give you an example of what it looks like. Here's the County of Santa Clara Shelter-in-Place Order homepage. You'll see there highlighted a box that says County Services Impacted by COVID-19. And that, if you click on it, takes you to a page, and that page you'll see in the first paragraph talks about the revised shelter-in-place order that went into effect at 12:01 a.m. on Friday, June 5th. That's the current order. You'll see in bold there it says most in-person services have been suspended and customers are asked to conduct business via phone or online channels. And then it says, importantly, scroll down to see more details for each department. So if you were to scroll down, I'll give you one example. Here is the updated services for the reentry services, Office of Reentry Services. You'll see first and foremost that the page is in English, but you can also see a link there and you can also translate it into Spanish. You can translate it into Vietnamese, and you can see there, I won't go through the text of the narrative, but you'll see the latest updated information for the Office of Reentry Services, what services are available, how to access those services, etc. Each one of our county departments, each one of our offices has a page like this that is regularly updated. I mentioned that we have a weekly, what we call COOP call, and at that weekly COOP call, we send out a reminder and tell everybody, to the extent there are any changes, make sure to communicate that so we can keep that website updated. We are providing a lot of support for departments and staff. As I said, if you look at the first box up there, you'll see we have our weekly COOP conference calls. Secondly, we're helping each department obtain supplies, including PPE, so that they can continue to perform essential county business. We're providing guidance on safe workplaces during COVID-19. We have established any number of protocols in the event somebody does contract COVID-19. We have lots and lots of guidance in place to help departments work through those issues. As mentioned earlier, we have updated public information on county services available on the website. And the last two bullet points really go to the bridge, which is sharing with our own employee staff to ensure that they are well informed on the current state of the county, the current state of COVID, and just providing updates on programs that support employees. We also have a broader recovery effort. The recovery effort overall is being overseen by Deputy County Executive Martha Wapensky. With respect to the county reconstitution plan, that piece of it is being overseen by Fran Palacio here in the county executive's office. What they have done is they've put together a cross-departmental team that has been focused on the safe reopening of on-site county public services for staff and the public when that time comes and when it's an appropriate thing to do in light of the health order. They are in the midst of researching and have done an awful lot of researching on best practices as those become available, as those become known, but they've been working on that for several weeks. They are looking at things like spatial changes that will need to be made, PPE that will be needed, sanitation, and other components of reopening. And then finally, they're looking at communication and education for all staff and all our clients, again, through the various channels that we've established over time. So that's the overall big picture, how we're looking at continuity of operations. Later on in this hearing, we'll hear from the Registrar of Voters, from SEPA, from the Sheriff's Office, and for planning, and they'll have more specifics of what each of those departments are doing. But for now, if you had any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Supervisor Chavez, any immediate questions?
Dave, I wanted to first say thank you to you for putting this together. I think this is really helpful, and I think FGOC is the right body to be examining this, so thank you. And also to Miguel and the team. I mean, everybody's working as fast as they can and in as many directions as possible. Couple things that I wanted to ask is that I haven't seen the actual county reconstruction plan, and I was hoping that you all could send that to the board, and mostly so that we're able to understand the structure and the framework that you're using to consider the reconstitution plan.
Let me, I'll talk to that team and ask them to provide whatever, draft and plan they have. I think it is still a work in progress. As I said, it's a multidisciplinary team and lots of changes, but certainly they have a lot of stuff. They can put together a package of information as to where they are and how they're thinking about the reopening. I'll ask them to do that. Hopefully get it to you by the end of the week.
Thank you. And Miguel, on that front, the other thing I'd be interested in is overarching goals that they have relative to reconstitution, because the opportunity here is to build better than we had before. And especially now that we know the capacity of TSS, for example, and what the implications are. I mean, we've learned a lot about our organization and what its capacity is. So I'd be really interested in their overarching themes there. And then the other is, do we have a single phone number that people can call to get information about the county's services and what's open and what timeline, if people don't have the capacity to search through our website?
That I don't know offhand, and I don't know if I'm looking to see if anyone on the call on the Zoom meeting here has that information. If they do, if they could chime in. Otherwise, I will try to find that information before the end of the meeting and we'll report back if that's okay.
Great. And there are two numbers that I'm thinking about. One is more relative to if you're a community member and you want to know something about reentry and you don't have access to a computer, or you want to know something about our hospitals, notarios, marriages, any of that for internal. And I'm curious about that because I don't think 211 has the capacity right now to assist us. So I'm looking for another number other than 211 where we have knowledgeable people that can be responsive. I think that's going to become more critical as we start to open up and we're mid-opening than even now. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Chavez. Gil, just one question from me, and that is, it's really kind of a high-level question in terms of the whole workforce situation. We have people telecommuting, we have people in essential positions that are still obviously in a face-to-face situation, not to mention frontline healthcare workers who are literally on the front lines. How about those who don't fit into any of those categories? And what is the, if you take the entire workforce of the county, not including IHSS, but the main thrust of over 22,000 employees, do you know what the division is now among people who are telecommuting versus working still in their physical departments versus none of the above?
I don't have that number handy with me now, nor do I even have enough information to make a guess about it. I do know that, you know, the way we define essential employees is to say essential employees are those employees who have to be on site in order to provide essential services. But that also, you know, if you think about that definition, it meant that even people who were teleworking were also involved in the provision of essential services. They just weren't essential employees because they didn't have to be at the work site and they've been working from home. I think that number does fluctuate a little bit, you know, based on people working and being called in to do the work at the EOC or called to be contact tracers and everything else. But that's certainly a number I can ask ESA to see if they have the latest data based on what people input in Kronos and provide that information to you as soon as I get my hands on it.
That'd be great. The question, it had not occurred to me to ask the question up until last Saturday, and I was on a town hall, video town hall transmission with Paul Lawrence, and one of the callers called in with the question and just said, when will the rest of the county employees be able to come back to work? And I think he kind of stumped the panel, or she stumped the panel. We weren't really sure. I mean, I think the when question, as we all know, has been very difficult because it depends more presumably on the level of vulnerability based on and risk based on COVID-19. But it really raised the question, how many people are we talking about? And is there some, relative to this meeting today, is there some sort of graduated plan to start moving people in, much like we're doing with the external economy? And I know you spoke to that in general terms, but I guess that would be the follow-up question once we knew how significant it was in terms of people that are just kind of on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, and we're certainly, you know, we've done all of the prep work, all of the researching best practices. And, you know, one of the health orders talked about, you know, reopening, and it had spatial requirements, I think 300 square feet, et cetera. So we're waiting for the health order to say, look, people that work in offices can come back under these conditions. And then we are primed and ready to go as soon as that order is made to, again, pivot. You know, again, I'm so proud of how quickly we pivoted in one direction. I think we're primed and ready to pivot back to be in full compliance with both the spirit and the letter of the health order, and in a way that brings our employees back safely to the work site. After, I think, you know, taking Supervisor Chavez's point earlier, when we look at and analyze what we've learned from this experience on how we can, in my judgment, make ourselves an even better organization. We certainly have our eye, you know, set on that task.
Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to getting that information, if not later today on this virtual meeting, with an off-agenda report, just in some form that we can share with the public the next time we get a town hall question like that. That'd be good to know. Let me ask the clerk if there's any, are you done with your presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Let me ask the clerk if there were any requests for public comment on item 3.
We do have one request so far.
All right, let's hear that request. And again, we're limited to 1 minute on these individual items.
Our next speaker is Wesley Mukuyama. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Hi, Wes. Are you there?
You hear me?
Thank you. Go ahead.
I've been working with mental health, behavioral health. I'm on behavioral health board, and I'm wondering if there could be a task force for outreach to the vulnerable populations, such as homeless, ethnic groups, undocumented, and the elderly, utilizing Cindy's Promotores group to go in collaboration to these vulnerable populations when needed. And the county would head this task force through public health to reach out to these people and use the CBOs, use housing, use different groups to help them reach out, the Promotores people, to reach out to those people and give the testing, bring the testers with them and work this out. I think we need to meet these vulnerable populations, and I would suggest Promotores be part of it.
Okay. Thank you, Wes, for the good suggestion, and we will take that under advisement. We're going to go ahead and move now to item 4, which is receipt of the report from the Office of Registrar of Voters relating to pandemic related health and safety safeguards heading into the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election or general election. Shannon, are you out there somewhere?
Yes. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, supervisors and everyone. So I guess I'll really start with, our office has been open to the public the entire time that the shelter in order place has been in effect. And that's because elections are considered essential. So we've been open to members of the public and our staff so that our office and the members of the public can continue to comply with requirements and deadlines that are set in law that can't be moved. So with that said, the majority of our staff are working every day in the office or are rotating into the office, a certain number of days a week, and otherwise teleworking. They are coming into the office because there are some tasks that cannot be performed remotely because, they rely on original documents like petitions or voting equipment, et cetera. So some of the employees split time between teleworking and coming into the office so they can access those paper records and provide customer service and, like I was saying, testing or maintenance of the voting equipment. But we have implemented safety protocols for both staff members and members of the public. I do want to, before I go into the presentation, just so everyone understands, for the November election, we will continue to provide in-person voting options for members of the public who do need to go to a vote center. And under the Voters' Choice Act, which our county switched to for the March election, I do want to remind everyone that we already mail every voter a ballot. So everyone will continue to receive their ballot, and we will have in-person voting options available for those members of the public or voters that need that. So let me begin with, so for the November election, we really focus on 3 main areas, which include serving our voters and candidates at our office and our voters and poll workers that are going to work at the vote centers. Sorry, a little touchy. So let me begin with the poll worker protection. Our poll workers, they play a vital role in our democracy in serving our community by working at our vote centers, which we very much appreciate. But we want to make sure that they are safe and at as low risk as possible in working. So each poll worker will be provided personal protective equipment, PPE, including a face mask, a face shield, a mask, gloves, and there will be sufficient disinfectant spray for their use. So for voters, to help ensure safe conditions at the vote centers, we're going to offer to each voter a disposable mask, gloves, and a stylus that they can use to vote while they're there. And that stylus will be sanitized after each use before another voter picks that up for voting. So in addition to the PPE that the voters and the poll workers have provided, when a voter comes into the vote center and walks up, where they sign in to the electronic poll books and at other service points, such as the actual ballot marking device, we are going to have there'll be clear plexiglass separating the voter from the poll workers who may be, signing them in on the electronic poll book. In addition, we plan, of course, to enforce social distancing for voters with 6-foot intervals that will be marked off. And as they are done voting, there will be bins to collect their used masks and gloves and the styluses that we can then disinfect and reuse. On the outside of the vote center, we'll actually have greeters who will issue PPE and ensure voters are waiting in line at least 6 feet apart. And, a lot of the voters may have their own mask or when they arrive, but if they don't, we will have those disposable masks for their use. And another way of ensuring additional safety and lowering risk is that we will have ballot drop-off boxes outside so that a voter doesn't even need to go into the vote center to drop off their ballot. And for those voters who need to vote from their car, we will continue to have curbside voting available for them. So on the inside of the vote center, we have actually redesigned the layout of the vote center to allow for more space and poll workers. And the poll workers will disinfect the equipment in between the uses of the voters. So at the end, a couple more slides, I will show you 2 examples of the in the video program that we used in March and how we're adjusting for the November election. And as far as our office, because as I said, we've been open the entire time. So we have already put safeguards in place inside for our staff members and members of the public coming in. So we've already installed and have safety protocol signage at the entrance of the building and our offices and all throughout our Registrar of Voters office area, because we have different portions, different areas on Burger Drive that we are working in. So we ask that visitors, which have been very limited so far, but visitors, employees who are sick or symptomatic are asked to leave, and those entering our office or even the public lobby are asked and required to wear masks. And again, if an employee or a visitor does not have a mask that they have with them, we will provide them a disposable one. In addition, at our front counters, like in the picture there at the grocery store on the slide, we have plexiglass that we have at all of our public-facing counters for any of our staff members that may be assisting and interacting with the public. So for visitors and observers who enter our secure area, we actually require them to use hand sanitizer and wear gloves in addition to the mask while they're in our office. And we have provided each of our divisions, each of the areas here on Burger Drive, enough, disinfectant, sanitizing pumps and masks and gloves for their use in the office and for them to be able to sanitize and wipe down their equipment throughout the day. So one of the first things that's coming up that might raise question is the candidate nominations. As you know, that starts in July through August, and will be the first piece of our November election with the public coming into our office. So we have developed and are offering some different options for candidates this time to be issued and to file their nomination documents. So candidates can now receive their documents electronically, and they can actually schedule online video calls with the staff members and the candidate services so that they can review their paperwork ahead of time to make sure everything's in order. Excuse me. So for the Declaration of Candidacy, for those of you who've run for office and know that form, normally you come into our office and you're required to do an oath of office and complete that in front of us. As we've done before, we're continuing to accept the candidate could go to a notary to get that form notarized. Or the new offering that we have actually is to have a staff member who can do a video call with you, witness you taking the oath. So we're adding that new option for voters, for candidates that aren't able to get to a notary. But in returning the documents, all of the original paperwork must still be filed in our office by the deadline, whether they bring it in or whether they mail it in. So I would just, if candidates were interested in mailing their paperwork, they need to ensure that they do it in enough time so that it's received, 5 o'clock by the deadline. So, and of course, though, we will still offer walk-in assistance for any candidate who would like to just come in and be issued and then again file their paperwork. So lastly, I wanted to show you 2 examples of the layouts for our vote centers. As you can see, this is the first vote center layout, one of the vote centers in Saratoga that we used in the March election. You can see how the equipment and the people are clustered more together. The yellow people being the ones like with the electronic poll books when they're coming in, and then they move over to voting booths or ballot marking devices, but kind of separated out in each area. Now this is the same layout, the same polling place, vote center for November. So, whoops, that's not it. Sorry. I mixed up my slides. So here's the same polling place there in Saratoga. You can see now we've reduced the number of electronic poll book sign-in personnel so that we could make more room in the vote center. And now you're seeing where there's not all of those wide open areas. We have spaced things out to do our social distancing in order to complete everything a voter needs to do at a vote center and continue to be aware, of the safety protocols in place. So let me go backwards now. So here is the second example I wanted to show you. This was the community center in San Jose. And again, you see the wide open spaces and the clustering of different pieces of service that we provide at the vote center. And then here it is in November. So again, definitely more spread out. You see red lines in front of the tables with the yellow personnel for marking off the social distancing footage so that voters can stand apart from each other, and in the line in the upper right-hand corner there where the black stanchions are, that they stand in line. So we have done this and are in the process of doing this for every vote center that we have. We already had done the March election layout, so we're making adjustments, which makes it much easier for the poll workers that are coming in to work at a vote center. They can see exactly where the equipment goes because we've gone out, we've measured the rooms, we've measured everything out. So those are just 2 examples of our vote centers. So definitely taking everything very seriously about our safety for our voters, our candidates, our members of the public coming in, and our staff. So I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. And
Thank you, Shannon. Let me turn to Supervisor Chavez. See what she has in mind.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the presentation. And we got a lot of our questions answered. I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with the computer, but we got a lot of our questions answered through you. I just had one request, and that was to better understand how the communication will work with voters to help them understand, we have a lot of transitions going on, and how they can learn about how to vote. And what I'm wondering is whether or not this requires more resources for your office in terms of being able to get on TV and radio, and even being able to, do little mini, here's how you vote, not just webinars, but little videos. Is that something that you feel like you're funded well enough to do? And if so, can you share the outreach program off agenda with the board?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can do that. I actually just found out last night the recommended budget was released. So I'm happy to report that we were allocated one-time funding for our outreach program and our advertising for the November election. So I was waiting for that information to come out. So we will be able to do, we did a historic amount of advertising and, working with 45 different vendors and everything in the March election. So we are going to be able to do that again for the November elections. So we'll incorporate VCA with the changes so that voters are aware.
So Shannon, can you give us the plan and just get it to us off agenda? And here's the reason. You guys, let me say one thing that I really appreciate about your department. And if you would just share this with your team, I think the openness they had to working with community groups, nonprofits, all the meetings you attended, all the communication you personally did, I really appreciate. I think it's just so noisy out in the world right now between COVID-19 and people going back to work and school that we're going to need something extra. And so I'm really interested in understanding what the communication plan in its totality looks like, so we understand how you're getting out in the world. And also, I know you guys were great about giving us articles for our newsletters, and we want to be helpful with that, but it's really bigger. Like, we're really having to explain a new way of voting to a whole bunch of people who haven't used it, and how to do it safely. And there are a bunch of new rules and opportunities for people as they mail in their ballots. I mean, I just feel like you're juggling. Anyway, would love to see the plan, and then as soon as it's available.
Of course, we'd be happy to do that. And of course, because there's probably many community partners that may be attending this hearing, we will rely and continue with our hundreds of relationships we have built. And we are every day looking for a new organization, a new business, a new advocate to work with. So we still have all of our voters' choice information online on our website. So if you're interested, or, maybe someone didn't vote in March and they're going to vote for the first time in November, and, there's all the information about the Voters' Choice Act online. And we will continue to do direct mailers to every single voter. And now that will incorporate the safeguards, et cetera. So we'd be happy to get you that off agenda.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, thank you. Just one big overarching question again for me, Shannon, and that is, do you anticipate, I know that you traditionally have relied on what we call extra help employees, sort of gearing up, ramping up, seasonal or temporary type extra help employees. For those listening in the public, that's what I'm talking about, to deal with the crush of activity, around election season. Do you anticipate any problem with that, or is there a backup plan that you're working with others in the administration, Mr. Marquez and other people, in terms of what happens if we get a surge? What happens if you get people that traditionally have been willing to come in and don't really want to take the risk? Any of those kind of issues top of mind right now?
Yes, we do have open recruitment right now for temporary workers for an election worker 1 and election worker 2, and we will have an elections aide coming soon that are currently on the website, those 2 positions that people can apply for. We actually already have people applying for that, but we are talking, we'll be talking more with the EOC about disaster service workers, if there's a potential of having county employees be assigned to that if needed. So that's part of like the backup plans that we're looking into and investigating. So at this time, we're not having challenges, but we want to be able to expect that and have plan B and C in place.
That's great to hear. The only other question I have, which is also kind of overarching, and if the answer is not yet, that's okay. So I'm not trying to give you a pop quiz here or anything, but any lessons learned from some of the recent experiences in other states that are still, running late primaries or special elections or anything? I only know what I read in my Apple News, but I'm just wondering if we're just focused on staying in our lane, you do a good job of that, or if you've had the opportunity to stop and take a look at some of the issues that have come up in other jurisdictions, obviously, that we would like to avoid.
Right. Well, I guess I'd touch right now on two pieces. One is the PPE, the personal protective equipment, and the spacing out at the vote centers. I saw in other areas that they weren't really doing that, weren't requiring masks in some voting locations, and they were just, clustered right together. So I think that is one of the biggest things we can do to lower risk, is to spread everyone out, make sure the workers and the voters, it's not just the workers. We need the voters to wear masks and do social distancing while they're in the vote center. The other thing that I would say is was of concern in some areas, but it won't be for us. But, to your point, is actually just having in-person voting available. There were some states or some areas that were only voting by mail and maybe reduced down to, 1 or 5 vote centers or polling places in the entire city or in the entire county. And I think that's an issue that I've seen and learned from in other areas. And we definitely are going to ensure that we have enough in-person voting opportunities, because someone may at the last minute, I can't find my ballot. I would like to use, a person with disabilities. I would like to use the audio ballot or enlarge the screen, because that's how I'd like to do it. But we do offer remote accessible ballots voting that they can do through the computer too, but not everybody has a computer. So I guess those are the two biggest things that come first to mind to me, is ensuring the PPE and the social distancing that I didn't see happen in other places, and keeping the in-person opportunity for a voter to go to.
Yeah, it sounds like you're playing it safe rather than sorry in terms of capacity, so you don't have a big rush and not enough places to go. Well, thank you.
That's the plan.
That's all I had. Was there any public comment, request for public comment on the ROV item, Colin?
We do have one request to speak.
Okay, we'll allow 1 minute, as we have been.
Our next speaker is Wesley Mukiyama. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
I am concerned Georgia was a disaster because they didn't have enough people to be at the registration sites for them, and they didn't have enough registration sites. I hope that you're anticipating that. And I live in the city of Santa Clara, which has moved to 6 districts, and the city council is not very happy with that. But I think with all these new implementations that you're putting in, I think I hope that there's not much confusion at the registration sites. That's my concern. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments, Wes. And I think Shannon addressed that. Was a similar comment to the one that I had. So thank you. That concludes public comment on the item, and I think that concludes the item. We appreciate you having been here. And Supervisor Shaw, is anything else in terms of last comment or direction on this item? And then we need to unmute you.
Sorry, no, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, which is the report from the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency, also related to COVID-19 activities, assisting with the regulated community countywide. I'm not sure who's up on this one.
Maybe Joe or Mike Valier.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. Christina McCaffrey, I'm the Administrative Services Manager here at SEPA. I was going to do the presentation, and then Joe and Mike are available for questions afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you able to see the screen?
No.
We only see you so far.
Okay.
There we go. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. So like I said, my name is Christina McCaffrey. I'm the Administrative Services Manager for the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency, SEPA. So thank you for the opportunity for us to provide this update today. So SEPA in general, our agency focuses primarily on safety and health related factors. So a lot of our operations have continued during the order, only in some sort of modified function. So we've had a significant amount of essential employees, many of them working in the field during this time. And we're going to focus on 3 areas today, really around business support, the Emergency Operations Center, our Agriculture and Environment, and Environmental Health Unit. So the EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, we've been pretty active there. We have approximately 15 employees just on site full time, and they're doing everything from environmental health, logistics, testing, translation services, driving, administrative support. We've got another 25 staff that we've committed to contact tracing. Some of those staff are already in place, and some of them are being deployed and will be trained soon. And then because of the nature of our work, specifically around food safety, we've done a lot of support with order, guidance documents, investigation, and enforcement. And we're having daily conversations with public health, county council, EOC on how to support businesses in that area. Mike Ballier, our Director of Environmental Health, has done 2 Facebook Live briefings, again, related to food safety. I'll start with Agriculture and Environment. Our first group there is Animal Services, and Animal Services provides both field and on-staff support. So the field support is animal control officers that respond to issues, and we have only been responding to urgent matters during this time. And then our shelter, which actually houses the animals and provides some veterinary care, we've limited that just to a small crew of our staff because it is just a small building that just doesn't allow for us to social distance much. We've stopped in-person licensing and in-person visits for no reason. Most of our animals are in foster care at this time. And if anyone is interested in adopting, we have a meet and greet with the animal outside or at the foster care home. Because so many people have been home and more attentive to their pets, and because we are not responding to non-urgent matters, we have a 60% less animal intake and a 70% decrease in our spay and neuter. One of the positive things here is we have a new shelter opening early next year, and the physical layout of that shelter will allow us to operate in a more safe fashion. With the recycling and waste reduction, specifically around businesses, we operate the Household Hazardous Waste and Small Business Services. That's a drive-through collection program for them to drop off their items, as well as a retail partner collection. So the retail partners are, for example, a hardware store or another community location where people can go drop off fluorescent light bulbs or household batteries. Both of these items or these services to businesses were paused, but we resumed them both last week. And we've been able to already collect from 10 small businesses. We have about 30 that we have backlog, but we think we can get through that fairly quickly. And our retail partners, for the most part, they weren't operating during the order, so they didn't really need our services. So for them, we're resuming at the same time, so there hasn't been much of an impact there. And then we also oversee the garbage collection services in unincorporated areas. And we paused on some of the enhanced, what I would call enhanced collection, things that we're collecting outside of the containers, but all other services have stayed in place. For Clean Water Program, this is enforcement and education of the county permits. So we have been only doing complaint-based inspections at outdoor locations to ensure safety. And we'll be getting back to regular business inspections prioritized based on the risk to ensure permit compliance. none of these permits or compliance would impact a business getting up and running again. The weed abatement program, which I think both of you are familiar with, is a program intended to not allow the spread of wildfire to structure. And so by that, we are enforcing defensible space. And that program has been able to operate at full capacity during this time. We're able to dispatch all of our staff directly from the field. And because it's one person per vehicle, we can easily maintain the social distance. For our agriculture program, some of our businesses have remained essential the entire time, some have not. So with that, our work has ebbed and flowed. And the ones that we have remained essential and we've done consistently are the pest exclusion, pesticide use enforcement, export certification, and farmers markets. The pest exclusion and export certification are essentially plant inspections. They're either coming in or out of the county, and we are looking for something that we would not want to spread within the county. So our high risk ones that we've been focusing on are plants that we know may carry something, or they're coming from an area or going to an area where there's a particular concern. Pesticide use enforcement was very limited in the beginning, but is growing now, and we're supporting that industry with allowing tests and overseeing their applications. And farmers markets are beginning to become bigger. There just wasn't too many before, and there just wasn't that many. If you went to one, there wasn't that many booths in place for us to inspect. In addition, we've sent guidance to over 600 agriculture businesses, and those guidance documents have been specific to agriculture, but also been general as far as in precautions needed for essential workers in the county. So for weights and measures, this is our only program that is not directly health and safety related, and as such, it did pause during the order. We want to move back to our outdoor and no contact inspections, which we will do. We call ahead of time to verify compliance. We'll conduct a regular visit and confirm the odor protocols. If there's a non-compliance with protocol, we'll inform the DA. One thing that we do in weights and measures every year with our point of sales or cash registers or anything that takes in payment is we do an annual registration process. So what that looks like is a mailer that goes out to all of our businesses. It's an invoice. We receive payment and they're able to operate, and then there's some sort of inspection in the year to follow. What we've done this year, though, is delay that process. It would have already gone out by now, but we want the businesses to be able to readjust, and we want to include guidance on the order when we send those out. So that will be sent to about 4,000 businesses, and that's going to be critical in them understanding the order. We've also made a decision to not have any late fees and to work with the businesses if they need partial payment plans or anything like that. But just to be clear, with the weights and measures, it's a registration process. It's not a permit. So if somebody wasn't able to pay or didn't respond on time or something like that, it doesn't hold them up from operating. In environmental health, we have vector control, solid waste, and hazardous materials. Essentially been applying the same theory here. We've paused on our routine inspections, and we focus on high risk and complaint-based activity, as well as things of legal nature. So for vector control, we've continued with mosquito abatement and surveillance. We continue to respond as needed to wildlife calls or rodent calls. Sometimes those are on site, and sometimes they can be taken care of in a virtual way. Solid waste tends to be more transfer stations that we're regulating. These have stayed essential and open the whole time. There's a small amount of them, and the nature of that business, those folks tend to be very highly safety trained. They're very in tune with FEMA and some other organizations, so they've not needed a tremendous amount of guidance from us during this time. And in the hazardous materials world, we've focused on construction and tank inspections, as underground storage tanks. We are legally required to do that, and with the order changing in early May to allow construction, there was more growth in this area. And consumer protection. So consumer protection is the group that oversees food safety and recreational health facilities such as pools. So this group has been extremely active throughout the order. As you probably are aware, there's been a lot of interest in restaurants, a lot of interest in grocery stores, more recently in pools. So we've been pretty active here, both with daily conversations with the EOC, Public Health, County Council, but with our businesses specifically in March and April, we were doing mostly phone outreach, web outreach, mailers, email blasts, that kind of thing. With every update to the order, we sent out a mailer. Those mailers were 6 to 7 pages long, and we went with every subsequent one. We did these updates. Online, we have the same information available: Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Tagalog, and then we've continued that process through now with the changes. But our biggest change was in May when we reopened our offices. Early May was the order change allowing for construction, and we knew we needed to receive plans in order to support that effort for our businesses. So at that time, we opened our office to allow for that. We've had about 12 walk-ins per day. Our office has precautions for social distancing. To note, we actually share a location with Registrar of Voters. So some of the building things that Shannon mentioned are the same here because we're in the same building. And we've accepted a bunch of plans here. We've done some permit, we've done some on-site guidance. We also restarted our on-site visits to food facilities during May. And we are doing those now in a high risk factor. So we may focus on a restaurant that does food prep on-site versus a gas station that maybe is just selling prepared food. And those inspections are happening in off hours to ensure that there's not a lot of folks in the building to allow for social distancing. We have extra PPE in place, and they've proved to be very informative for the businesses and also our staff. During this time, we've already completed over 1,200 inspections, so we've been pretty active with this community, and we've continued on that same path of sending guidance documents out every time the order has changed. None of the permits during this time were paused or canceled. They all remained in place, so there's no worry there. Similar to weights and measures, we're doing the same thing where we're not intending to charge any late fees, and we'll work with businesses if they need to work on a payment plan or some other type of alternate arrangement that maybe we previously would not have included. And then just to close, next steps and ongoing, I think that Miguel had mentioned it in his earlier presentation, but the county reopening team, we want to work with them, especially on our routine areas, to make sure that we're continuing with safety and organizational consistency. We also, the things that we have been doing successfully virtually and successfully just in the field without having people to come into the office, we want to look at those potentially to continue those for the future. Evaluating our roles, we want to encourage, to the extent as possible, online payments so that they're contactless. We suspect, because the nature of our work, we will be supporting the EOC and the continuing operation plans pretty significantly. And we definitely need to monitor our budgetary impact. So specifically to Department of Environmental Health, with the restaurant industry being impacted so much, we saw a 30% decrease in our fee revenue during this time. We expect that to look at about 10% when you look at it annually, but it's certainly significant enough that we need to be monitoring that, as well as the other parts of the order. So that concludes the sort of overview for SEPA. And for questions, there's a variety of us on the line. So I have Joe Zintek, our Director of SEPA, Mike Ballier, Director of Environmental Health, although he's been full-time at the EOC since early March. Rochelle Gotti, our Director of Consumer Protection, who's been very active with the food facilities and recreational health facilities, and Joe DeVinny, our Agriculture Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Very comprehensive report, and I'll put one of those universal thank yous out to everyone so far, and I probably suppose everyone who hasn't presented yet for as Mr. Marquez said earlier, for the pivot that you've made, or the dramatic efforts that you've made so effectively to move to telework and some of these other options under the circumstances. That's all very impressive. Supervisor Chavez, I'll turn to you. I have maybe one question, but why don't we hear from you first?
Thank you. Christina, thank you for that incredibly good overview. I just really well done. A couple things that I want to better understand that I don't think I fully understand the implications of this. When you were talking about weights and measures being a registration program versus a permitting program, that, and your point was that if because it's a registration program, that you haven't registered them doesn't stop them from operating. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why that is. And also I'm intrigued that it's not considered a health and safety body of work the way your other bodies of work are.
Sure, I think I'll ask Joe DeVinny maybe to unmute himself and respond.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for the question, Supervisor Chavez. Yeah, the weights and measures is an annual registration fee, and that's for all your devices, weighing devices, measuring devices, scales, gas pumps. And then we also have the annual registration for your point of sale systems, which are the scanners. So that always happens in May. And as Christina mentioned, we've postponed it to let everybody kind of get their feet out under them. So we've delayed that going out. But that's just the registration. And there is a fee associated with that depending upon the types of devices and scanners you have. And then what that also triggers is us to do an inspection. So it's not a health and safety concern because there's no food security, sanitation type of a thing. It's mostly financially based. So financial health, I guess, would be how to say it, for overcharges or getting not what you paid for. But as also Christina mentioned, it wasn't considered an urgent thing that we needed to do during COVID, so we put it on pause, but we are looking forward to getting those things going again. Did that answer your question enough, Supervisor?
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I think one thing that came to mind was the organizations that sell marijuana, for example, and marijuana products. And the weights and measures, I think when I think about health and safety, I think about this as consumer protection with a subset of health and safety. And that subset of health and safety is things that get measured that could have an impact on what you ingest and what you take, whether that is, vitamins from a big bin or marijuana. And so are those not considered, are those under this program and another program? And is that why you're not as worried about them? And is it, that's really what I'm trying to better understand.
Okay. Excellent question. We do visit all the cannabis dispensaries, and they are, from our purview, responsible for IRQ, identity of the product, responsibility of who, if there is a problem with the product, who we would approach, and then the quantity. And that is like the number of pills or the ounces of brownies or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But as far as the dosing, the THC level or the pharmaceutical ingredients, we don't, that's more of an FDA type of approach there. So we don't do that.
Okay, thank you, Joe. That's helpful. And then just another question: when you go out and you do weights and measures for, I'm sorry, you're looking at a cash register in a liquor store. Does the person who goes in, is their sole job that cash register, or are they also looking for other potential risks to the public? And in particular, I'll tell you what made me ask this question is that, I was talking to some parents recently about young people's access both to alcohol right now and to vaping. And it appears that from some of these parents' experience that liquor stores and in particular that were at one time very careful about this, that as the rules, I think just we're in a weird time, but that they felt like they were seeing more violation of rules that they hadn't seen with these particular venues before. So do we look at that if we were to go in and look at Are our eyes on everything, or our eyes on what we're most responsible for?
I'd say both. We're kind of trained, especially with the other SEPA divisions. If we're at a gas station and we see some tires that have a bunch of water in them, that would be a mosquito risk. If we're at a gas station and we see some spillage or some oil leaking or some things, then we would alert DEH for that hazmat type stuff. Once inside the building, though, we would only be inspecting counter scales for the weight of any food that, for different deli sandwiches or something, or if they have a scanner type of a cash register. If it's old-fashioned register, it's just we wouldn't get that one. But we would be looking for the sale prices, the posted prices, any prices on any of the commodities, and then we would do a test on those selected items to make sure they're all being rung up correctly and no one's being overcharged and everybody's receiving the lowest price posted as an advertisement. But that wouldn't be difficult for us to do if we do notice some vaping or alcohol type sales that look suspicious or out of compliance. We could alert the DAD group or whoever would be the right group. We try to work with open eyes and open mind to support all other county divisions and agencies.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And then Supervisor Cortese, thank you for your patience. I have 2 more questions and I'm out of time.
We'll take it out of your next section.
Okay, good. And out of my last section. So the 2 others I wanted to just dive into. One is I'm very interested in understanding our partnership with the cities to support restaurants reopening. And I was intrigued, Christina, with the point you said about that 0 permits have lapsed countywide, because even if they close down, we're not counting that right now as a lapsed permit, which I think is one thing that's fabulous. I'm also wondering if there are other requests that you're getting that we should be thinking about from a policy perspective that you've had a difficult time addressing to support these restaurants opening and staying open.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Mike Vallier or Rochelle, do you want to unmute yourself and take that one?
Yeah, Mike Vallier here. Thank you guys again for having us today. Great to see everybody. As Christina mentioned, I've been assigned to the EOC since mid of March and primarily supporting a lot of the operations here. But when it comes to the environmental health component, the team has really been doing an excellent job of supporting me and ensuring that the community continues to receive the valuable services that we provide. Our role changes quite a bit. And so to get to your point, Supervisor Chavez, we have had multiple discussions and several cities have reached out to us to help provide additional guidance. And so on our website, we have all the guidance that we typically send out. And as Christina mentioned, goes out to over 10,000 individual food facilities on at least 3 times that I'm aware of. And then also Rochelle has had several discussions with several cities, as well as we provide updates periodically on some of the EOC calls. I think the most recent one that came out was more about the outdoor dining. And so the cities are in the process of helping amend some of their municipal codes to allow for the outdoor dining. And right now, there is no special approval needed from environmental health or public health as long as people are following the outdoor dining guidance that we currently have posted on our website. But that's an example of where cities can really rise up, and we're here to support that particular effort, because obviously eating outdoors at this point is safer than eating indoors.
Mm-hmm. That's super helpful. Thank you for that. And then my last question is, of the 25 contact tracers that you have offered, what would those folks be doing for you that's not getting done?
Joe, do you want to unmute yourself, Zintec, and take that one? So not hearing her, I'll go ahead and answer that. So obviously with that many contact tracers, they're in a variety of positions within the agency. The first group that was deployed were all administrative support staff. And then we've just had a variety of folks in almost every group or division. I do think that primarily they've been support staff, but we have had some folks that are a little more nestled in the operations.
So the reason I'm asking the question is, one, I really appreciate the leadership that you've taken to get folks over there. That's really critical. I do want to make sure that you play a very unique role, your department, of almost any department that we have in the whole county, in terms of the role you play as it relates to reopening and really supporting cities and getting reopened. So I do want to just caution that making sure that we're not putting you at a deficit to respond to the cities is really pretty critical, at least to me. And I know Dave has played a leadership role in trying to make sure that we're building the bridge between the county and these cities in terms of supporting them getting on their feet again. So I would just ask that you all take a good solid look and make sure that as things start to open up, that you've got the people you need in the places you need them. But thank you for the presentation. I learned a great deal. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. I have a question, and I hope I didn't miss the answer already while I was, Mike might have touched upon it, but I'm not clear. And it just has to do with the restaurant, the site inspections that also now include, I guess, at least some look at general compliance with the orders. So I've been in 3 establishments, 2 which surprises even me because I didn't think I'd be, and somehow in 3 restaurants already since outdoor dining, but two that were outdoor dining, and one that just is not an outdoor dining facility per se, but has outdoor seating where you order at the counter. That one, just seemed to be in total compliance, 6 feet apart, waiting in a line. They go to the counter, people wait at distance for their order to be prepared. There's tables outside that are distanced from each other. There's no outdoor service, so there really wasn't a need for a lot of sanitization and stuff like that with payment and so forth. That's already been done. But the 2 establishments, I'm not going to mention specifics, names or anything like that, in 2 completely different parts of town that had the outdoor seating and service, had a very weird mix of compliance and non-compliance just by my observation. And I'm wondering if that's what you're running into so far, if there's been, how do you deal with the ongoing education? I didn't feel like I felt like there was a lot of effort going on, but I also think that there's probably some imperfection in the fact that customers are not in complete compliance, that people are coming in not necessarily in family cohorts and things like that. In one of my experiences, because it was a popular destination, I was quite aware of tables that were set up that were not family cohorts, adjacent to me. So I'm just wondering, if you could just give me a minute or 2 in terms of so far, how is that? What's a day in the life of when you try to deal with that kind of mix of compliance, non-compliance as you come into a place, an eating establishment?
Thank you, Supervisor Cortese. I'm glad to hear you're getting back out there and enjoying our restaurants. We want to encourage everybody to do that. And it is, still a little bit early, I think, in the process of the outdoor dining. But with that said, I actually spent the Facebook Live last time, about a week ago, focusing on this particular issue and hoping to provide both the public and a lot of our restaurants some context as to what the expectations are. And the reality is that, we can't be everywhere at once. And, we really do have to balance food access with food safety, as well as compliance with the orders. And so we do get complaints and work closely with the district attorney's office, who is sort of the point on non-compliance with the order, to prioritize and investigate those appropriately. Sometimes it can just be a phone call to the facility, just letting them know that either somebody observed something, but the public is really our eyes and ears out there. And we would really encourage people to report those things accordingly so that we can follow up. But with that said, we've also sent out the outdoor guidance. We're following up with education, and it just takes a little bit of time to get through the inventory of locations that we have, because we have almost 10,000 facilities in the county. So I mean, I think most people, at least most of what I've seen so far, want to comply and are interested in complying. They just may not know exactly what it is. And so our team has a checklist that they can go through with the facility. It's a consultation. It's not issued in a violation type situation, to help them better construct their social distancing protocols.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And I'm guessing Supervisor Chavez does too, because she and I spent a great deal of time working with, and have for the past several weeks, many weeks, with businesses as they've emerged out of the shelter in place. We have worked with them. Some are much more, some business owners are much more detail oriented, like anything in life, and much more clear thinkers and orderly in their thinking. And you can get the impression that they don't need a lot more education, that they have both the responsibility and the technical skills to pull this off. In other cases, even before the orders were actually lifted, and frankly, I've seen that in some areas that have yet to be lifted. I won't mention the sectors, but there's only so many left remaining, where we're hearing a lot of, hey, we're adults, we're grown-ups, we know how to distance, we know how to wear masks, we know how to deal with PPEs, and then I think we have a healthy degree of skepticism on our part as to whether or not everybody's using the same playbook in that regard in terms of responsibility. And again, it's a weird mix of going out. Graduations will force you to do this, to go out with my little 4-person family cohort and have something to eat. A very positive experience on the one hand, and then on the other hand, feeling like, well, you really aren't being completely adult and doing everything you're supposed to be doing here, as promised. And I guess I understand we can't and shouldn't police everybody all the time. This isn't Big Brother, but I think education, and much like we've done with hazmat over the years and other things, where it's just, look, fire compliance, you need to do this. It's for everybody's good, and just reminders as to what you're supposed to be doing may be a way of life for you folks for quite a while in the future, is my guess. And spot checking combined with as much broad-based continuing education as we can muster. And I think the Board of Supervisors is going to have to, even in tough budget times, be prepared to help you with capacity in that regard, because none of this means anything without an ongoing effort. So thank you. Did we have public comments in this section, Colin?
We do have 2 speakers currently.
Okay, let's hear from them, a minute apiece.
Our next speaker is Wes Mukayama. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yes, my question is, are you the only organization that's going to do contact tracing? And how do you do it in the homeless encampments, elderly units where they have nursing homes? And how do you do it with ethnic groups and undocumented populations? That's my question.
We'll come back to that after the other speaker. We'll give the staff an opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Our next speaker is DJ Bai. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, yeah, this is RJ Castro with Days Gone By Food and Event Services. My question is 2-part. One, where will events, people, amounts, and so forth, when will that type of procedure be available? And then second, in regards to more towards the corporate dining, is there going to be a separate type of policy, or will these types of inspections being done at corporate environments? Because there's a lot of those that are not retail restaurants, but they're still providing food services in a mobile capacity or in a cafeteria capacity. So I'd like to get a little clarification on both of those, if you don't mind. Appreciate your time and efforts in trying to keep us all healthy and safe in these uncertain times. But it is definitely good to hear that everyone is participating and getting feedback to help the community. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ, and thank you, Wes. Christina, do you want to take a stab at just a general response to those two? And we can certainly direct these constituents to additional staff help after today's meeting.
Sure. So the first question on contact tracing. So our agency actually doesn't own that area. That's something that's come up through public health and obviously through the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are not the only department that has committed people. Many departments have throughout the overall county organization. I don't have the details to answer your specific questions on how that works with those specific populations you asked about, but I think we could be happy to get back to you with some of our public health counterparts.
Yeah, and there's about 269 or 270, I believe, contact tracers to date coming from various departments and also outside volunteers, and that force continues to grow in numbers. We'll get you the homeless response, Wes, after today's meeting. My staff is staffing the meeting. We'll make sure we get that to you because that's an ongoing concern from the Board of Supervisors as well. And the question about larger events, that's a stage 3 or phase 3, if not phase 4, part of the opening. We will, RJ, if you check in with my staff again, we will get you the latest information from public health, although it continues to remain a little bit unpredictable as to when we're going to get to the next stage of opening. Certainly no sooner than two-week incubation period since the last orders, and that won't be upon us for another few days. So we hope in a week or two we'll get more clarity on how close we are to stage 3 or phase 3, which is includes the areas that you were describing. But check in with my office, 408-299-5030, or by email, and we'll get you additional information on that. Thank you all. Great reports thus far, and we will move now to item 6. This is a report from the Office of the Sheriff related to COVID-19 pandemic and continuity of public safety services. Sheriff, welcome. Thank you for being with us the whole time. I've seen your smiling face listening to all these great reports with us. We'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And we at the Sheriff's Office have responded, as other agencies have, to an unprecedented challenges of COVID-19. And we've been using the data and information that we continue to receive from public health. We have made very quick decisions to adjust staffing in order to respond to this health crisis and public emergency, but our operations have remained open 24/7 without any impact to critical services, both in the community and within our correctional facilities. The men and women of the Sheriff's Office have continued to respond to calls for service, protect our inmates, and serve their community, even with the additional challenges and risks that have been added. And I really want to take this opportunity to commend our staff for their professionalism and their dedication during these very difficult times. Due to the risks, we've had to make changes to our operation, including measures to mitigate exposure. We also had to make staffing adjustments to allow for social distancing to protect our employees and the public that we serve. But overall, our operations have expanded and actually become more complex during this time because of all the added challenges that we have in public safety. This really is our guiding principle in what we've been operating on in response to the COVID-19. We implemented very, very early measures. On March 4th, we had our first exposure in the jail, and on March 4th was the date of our first contact tracing. So we had a contact tracing process in place from the very beginning. In addition to working with the county's Emergency Operations Center, which we have a seat, we established an internal incident command center within the sheriff's office. And this was to manage and coordinate all of our responses to the virus. We use NIMS and SIMS, the incident management system, with our internal incident command center also. We also established a virus response team, and they are responsible for assisting and investigating high exposure calls for service in the community and within the jail facilities. This team of sworn employees were trained in proper decontamination and virus mitigation practices. During the development of this, we worked with the County Fire with their hazmat team for assistance in establishing procedures. We also established designated areas for decontamination with equipment, and we had a rental shower also that we used. Agencies, including from surrounding counties, also either came and viewed our process so they could implement their own, or actually sent their personnel to our facility and having our personnel do the decontamination. We purchased additional equipment that was capable of decontaminating vehicles and small buildings, and that was something that we used quite often for other agencies also. We have provided on this slide a link to some of the media that we received on this virus response team. We also established a COVID-19 investigation unit, and their function is to initiate contact tracing investigations for all positive individuals and to trace their contacts, and for potential exposures, to make notifications, to isolate, and to test people who have come in contact. Our tracing unit is for our employees and inmates, but notifications have been made to anyone, any external staff like custody health workers, court staff, or any others who may have been at risk or exposed to someone who had tested positive. Our investigators, among others, have done interviews, a review of internal camera systems, body-worn camera systems. So they do a full investigation anytime that there has been a positive person identified. And on this, we have also attached some media links on media coverage of our COVID investigation unit. This is a pretty detailed slide. It's a de-identified chart, but we use link analysis technology to track all of the exposures. This enabled the ability for our contact tracers to identify clusters, multiple exposures, and you can see on here, the clusters. And again, this is using link analysis technology for this. It's something that was established very early in the sheriff's office. We have an unwavering commitment to keep our custodial facilities as safe as possible, and our operations continue to evolve on a daily basis with the changing environment. One of our first measures was to eliminate the introduction of non-essential individuals into our facilities and to limit inter-facility movement of inmates. In February, we began working with custody health services to implement many viral mitigation strategies. We are cognizant of the challenges and the living conditions for inmates and the impact actually on their families also. We're currently developing plans for safe strategies to reintegrate services, including inmate visits. We don't have a date now. We're very often asked that, but we are developing a strategy that can limit exposure and movement. I also early on requested a review of our strategies and management practices from the County Public Health Department. In that review, I asked for them to look at what we were currently doing and making any recommendations for any future improvements. And I have attached a link to the report that Assistant Public Health Officer Dr. Rudman provided in this review. One of the things that Dr. Rudman said in her review is the county's jails are doing a better job of addressing COVID-19 related concerns than the vast majority of other custody settings to prevent the risk of infection for both staff and inmates. And we're real proud of what she found, that we were already doing, and we've also implemented some of her recommendations. Prior to the implementation of many of our strategies, I met with custody help leadership, and we identified risks and developed mitigation strategy measures. Our primary goal in this was to reduce the population while also limiting the intake of new inmates in order to reduce the potential exposure within the facilities. That being said, public safety is our primary concern. I do not support the mass release of in-custody inmates or that have serious and violent charges or a record of serious and violent charges. We have an extremely manageable level of population right now, and I don't believe there needs to be any further extraordinary measures to reduce population. And to put things in context, in 2007, our population was almost 4,900 inmates, and it hasn't been below 3,000 in more than 22 years. When we started tracking the population as it related to COVID, on March 9th, our population was 3,294. On June 13th, this last weekend, our population was 2,086. We have reduced the population from the March 9th date, 1,208 inmates. And there's been a lot of questions about how we did it. On March 11th, a team from the Sheriff's Office, we met with court administration and the judicial leadership, including presiding Judge Ryan, Judge Gaffon, and Judge Zahner. The purpose was to develop strategies to reduce the jail population, keeping in mind public safety. Our focus was on the medically fragile, high-risk groups like people who are elderly or have medical conditions. And we also focused on those that were pending releases to mental health facilities. We initiated an electronic monitoring program within the Sheriff's Office that actually monitors them 24/7, and we send out a deputy sheriff if they're out of compliance with the terms of their electronic monitoring. The court was instrumental in assisting us with that, in removing some of the no program conditions of their sentence. Working with the court, we were also able to push out surrender dates for those who were scheduled to come in to serve sentences. We requested and were granted from the court a stay of 171 people who were scheduled to report to jail to serve their sentence. And that was in early March, and the number of people who have stayed sentences right now are 714 people. Those were scheduled to surrender to our custody. However, about 80% of those were scheduled to report to the Sheriff's Work Program. We have looked at those numbers now, and those numbers have continually increased. Working with the court, we have allowed people who were on work programs, and at the time that we met with the court, there were 706 inmates on our work programs. They were allowed to receive credit for the time that they were on the work programs during this COVID. We requested, and the court has been very judicious in being thoughtful about remanding people into custody. We also requested and were granted, again from the court, expediting us receiving the court documents so that people who were scheduled to go to state prison could be sent as quickly as possible. We knew that the state prison was going to shut down intake, which they actually have. I know the state is paying us for continuing to house people that have been sentenced to state prison, but we wanted to make sure that we could get as many people out of custody as possible early. We also met with all the law enforcement agencies, and we requested that they utilize alternatives to booking as often as possible. And at one point, our number of bookings on a particular day was down 60%. We worked with both probation and parole for them to review existing probation and parole holds and to use discretion for future violations. We had a lot of meetings with pretrial, and we asked for expedited process in people who were going to be released on their own recognizance, because we wanted their release papers to be finished prior to them being introduced into a housing environment within the facility. Also, the State Administrative Office of the court issued an emergency bail schedule. It's referred to as the zero bail schedule also. And many people have been released on zero bail. We actually have released 449 people since the zero bail schedule was enacted. But we've written 1,161 zero bail receipts. This slide depicts the manner in which inmates have been released. And if you'll note on there, the public defender and the DA's office initiated and actually released a total of 256 inmates, including those that were released early that were serving their sentences. The total number on here, the 7,025, is the number of, other than the releases listed, those are the number of standard releases that have been done. That's from March until now. So you can really see the magnitude of our operation in the number of releases that we've done March through June. The early identification and containment of those who are positive was and continues to be essential in reducing the spread within our facilities. We have increased, I won't go through this slide, we've increased safety measures at intake, including temperatures, and Custody Health has been a wonderful partner in this. We've worked collaboratively with them to make sure that we have medical screening and everything, and they've been a really a great asset during this time. Custody Health and the Sheriff's Office have initiated testing for inmates. Basically, everybody who comes in on day one into the facility is tested for COVID. They are then housed in a risk management unit where they are observed and medically monitored for a period of 14 days. And we actually established originally 9 of those risk management units where we could have the isolation of new intakes for the 14 days. So currently, we are now testing everybody on day 12. And when they come back negative for COVID, then they're put into a general housing area. We actually had forecasted that this increased level of testing that we're doing in the facilities would increase the number of people who tested positive, and it has done that. Many of the ones who have tested positive have been asymptomatic. In the past, the only testing that we did were people who did exhibit symptoms of COVID, and then they were offered a test. We've done many additional measures to decrease or eliminate inmate movement within the facilities. All non-essential transportation was canceled. In the transporting of inmates, we reduced to only 3 inmates per van and only 6 inmates in one of our large buses. I mentioned earlier we had purchased decontamination equipment, and we decontaminate holding cells and vehicles. All inmates were provided with masks, And at one point, there were 2 positive inmates on our minimum camp area, and we tested the entire camp population. I think it was around 340 people on the camp that were tested, and all of them came back negative. In fact, and I believe that everyone who has been tested and turned out positive have been in one of those 14-day isolation areas. So we were able to really contain it without it getting into the larger population. Custody Health provided an on-site physician so we could limit transportation to the hospital for routine treatment. And our staff was assigned consistently to the same assignment so we wouldn't introduce new staff into particular housing areas. Again, there are many, many more mitigation efforts and prevention measures that we've taken and put in place. And we have a more extensive PowerPoint presentation actually attached to this item also. Video arraignments is something that we also looked at, and video conferencing, particularly for attorneys meeting with their clients. And we did have a large project that was in place, but because it was not operational at the time, our staff put together a real rudimentary system for video arraignments, and we're doing that currently in the facilities. The Public Defender's Office also implemented a tablet system where they could have a non-contact visit with their client, and we assisted the Public Defender's Office in that initiative also. I've attached a link to our website for additional COVID-19 information. Also, it should be noted that we have a total of 15 Sheriff's Office staff that have tested positive for COVID-19. 12 have fully recovered and returned to work, and 3 are off and are recovering currently. We've had some additional challenges recently too, and as sheriff, I serve as the operational area mutual aid coordinator, and as such, we've supported numerous mutual aid requests, both within our county and also throughout the region. As tragedy struck Santa Cruz County on June 6th, our sheriff's office assisted with providing law enforcement patrol coverage for Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office while they investigated, searched for additional suspects, and provided all the investigative need in the tragic shooting and loss of Sergeant Damon Gutzweiler. We were able to help out Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office. Our Sheriff's Office, we remain ready to assist in any area that we need during this COVID-19 outbreak. We will also continue to ensure the safety of county workers, critical infrastructure, and critical staff members. We are continuing to develop plans for when the courts go into full operation. But I really, again, want to thank our personnel for their dedication and challenges during this very difficult time. I'm proud of each and every member of the Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Supervisor Chavez, questions, comments?
Yes, thank you very much. Sheriff, first of all, thank you for the report, and please share my gratitude with your folks. They've been really working hard and been really amazing. And I am sorry for your loss for the sheriff that was killed in Santa Cruz. Could you talk just a moment about the process right now of the 7,000 people not coming into the jail? And what I'm wondering is, I understand that the Chief Justice is reconsidering or maybe they already withdrew the zero bail approach. And I'm wondering what is the implications of that for the jails?
So the 7,000, that was the total number of releases we've had since March. We actually have the stay of commit dates. That's the 719 amount that I put out. We have released 449 people since the emergency bail schedule, I think 449, since the emergency bail schedule was put into effect, and through just having a zero bail. The administrative office of the court did vote to rescind the emergency bail schedule, and that will be effective on June 20th.
Okay.
So the bail schedule will go away. But I know in this county, our pretrial services has been very responsive in being aggressive on who they release and monitor. So there will be an impact, but I don't think it'll be a real substantial impact because some of those people who have been released on zero bail could possibly have been released on their own recognizance. But we'll see. The end of it will be on June 20th. And our population is all-time low right now.
Right. But just to be clear then, the folks that were let out, for the most part, were nonviolent offenders, right?
You know, the zero bail schedule, if you're referring to those that were released on the zero bail schedule, the zero bail schedule makes it zero bail for all misdemeanors, I think with the exception of domestic violence and many felonies, but not the serious and violent felonies. Those continue to have bail. Also, the arresting officer, if they believed there was a reason for a higher than zero bail, they had the right to assert that in writing under Section 1269C of the Penal Code. They had the right to assert that so there would be a judicial review on the zero bail. So there were protections for public safety built into that zero bail schedule.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Cindy. You caught up, Cindy, with your time consequences. Yeah. Sheriff, I don't want to get off topic, but and a lot of your emphasis today was on custody, and rightfully so, because we have people in close proximity, and all those sort of hazards that you just talked about when it comes, or vulnerabilities when it comes to COVID. On the patrol side, the question I have is, I know from talking to you, and I have the advantage as FGOC chair to talk to you on almost a weekly basis sometimes, and then prompted also by external activities like the protests when they first started to happen. You and I were in contact fairly immediately, as was the undersheriff, just in terms of touching bases on how things were going as those protests initially started in Santa Clara County, right on the border of Supervisor Chavez's district and my district before they moved into the downtown area. So one of the things we talked about shortly after that was, and I relate this, I just want to say for attorneys present, I'm relating this back directly to COVID and transmission rate. I don't want to get into a justice discussion at this point, Sheriff. I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity for that in the weeks ahead. But cartoid holds for one thing. I mean, just from a pandemic standpoint alone, one would think that that would be one of the things on the patrol side that you'd be working out with the force. To obviously they can't be in full PPEs all the time, but to avoid unnecessary contacts and so forth. I know you told me a week or so ago that you were in the process of essentially negotiating away the use of those holds in your own department. And I know that's something, again, for justice reasons, people are talking about, across the country right now. What things like that have been accomplished, or are you thinking of accomplishing, just again, in terms of balancing the need for public safety, which is what this presentation is supposed to be all about, with the need for distancing and public health safety at the same time?
Well, I did mention that we had that COVID response team, and what they do is they'll go to high-risk calls to provide PPE instruction and everything to any deputies in the field or within the jail where there's a high-risk situation. Yes, we've had a lot of protests, and certainly the voices are being heard. What we saw in the murder of Mr. Floyd was abhorrent. It's something that is not a proper procedure with our agency. Since that time, a lot of the protesters have talked about instituting this 8 can't wait, and they have identified 8 particular things that law enforcement agencies should do. And of those 8, 7 of them we are doing and have been doing. It's been a long-standing practice, and our policies support our practice. The one thing that we did talk about early on, Supervisor Cortese, and I appreciate your willingness to have this conversation with me, is the carotid restraint. We did have in our use of force continuum the ability to use a carotid restraint. It was very high in the continuum and rarely used, but it was there. And I think a lot after our discussion and reflection within the agency, we met with the union leadership and told them that we believed that it would be smart to remove the carotid restraint from our use of force continuum. It is no longer an option for less lethal force within our continuum. And so as of last week, we are extremely proud that we have actually met and probably even to some degree exceeded all of the 8 can't wait issues. I think that there's going to be another discussion at one of the other board committee hearings on that, and we look forward to a robust discussion. But what we've done lately and what we'll continue to do is reevaluate our policies and procedures to make sure that we do everything in a fair and just manner.
Thank you for that. It just seems like what I learned, I'll speak for myself, going all the way back to the Blue Ribbon Commission and the 600 overall recommendations that came out of that and the 80 adopted ones by the board, is that there's this these public safety and health issues are not mutually exclusive. In fact, what we learn is, whether it's ADA in the jails, psychological help in the jails, mental health response in the jails, or things that we're doing out in the field, that there's this dual lens that you have to look through now, obviously in the jails as a result of what we learned over the last couple of years on ADA and mental health issues and public safety. And it just seems to me now, as you're looking at things both through the justice lens, it's kind of a triple lens, the justice lens, the public safety lens, but also the pandemic lens, that some of these things, like these holds, and I'm glad to hear that you were able to negotiate those away, really satisfy, perhaps 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 areas of concern that have all kind of come together like a confluence right now. They're not freestanding issues anymore. What kind of touching or hold to use out there may be both a justice issue and a pandemic issue. But I think it's going to be important for us to hear from you how you tie those together in the future, so that we're not, sort of siloing ourselves in one area while we're talking about whatever the 8 things are, without the context of, and if we move, or since you've moved in the direction of those 8 things, what benefit do we get in terms of pandemic response out of that behavior or not? I think it's important for us to keep talking about, not today, but in the future. And then lastly, I know you have a report coming on video arraignment, potential cost savings, late in the summer or early fall. I think that was being negotiated with us on the FGOC agenda on a regular meeting date. But I just want to encourage, especially, given the timeliness of the budget being out, the timeliness of this meeting talking about capacity. I know you must, like all the other departments, be having severe sticker shock in terms of what you're having to deal with in terms of cuts. And I assume the judicial system, which is separate from us fiscally, has similar concerns. Those judges trying to figure out how they're going to pay for everything they need to pay for over in the superior courts. It just seems like a great time to be looking at, much like we've looked at telecommuting in the county, a great time to look at video arraignment as a way to take an age-old significant cost of multi-million dollars and shift it back over where that money could be used to backfill for some other things that you can't afford right now. So I just wanted to encourage that as one supervisor. Obviously, my colleagues will have to weigh in someday on whether or not that kind of a shift makes sense. But I want you to have as much of a bolster from me, and especially when you have to go in and talk to the judiciary, who hasn't always been so keen on video arraignments, and perhaps some of your peers in the DA's office and so forth. I think it's something to fight for if the money can better be used somewhere else. I just wanted to lay that comment out one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have at least 3 hands up for public comment, and we went a little bit longer on this section. I want everyone to know I recognize that, and we have one more section to go after this, so we're going to try to wrap up relatively on time here. We're a little bit over, but we'll get done pretty soon. Colin, do you want to call on the 3, I think it's 3 public speakers, and we'll give them a minute each to speak on this item.
Yes, we do have 3 speakers. The next speaker is Christine Clifford. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. There is a technical issue with Christine Clifford's version of Zoom. Christine, if you could either dial in or update your software, we can hopefully get you back in the next minute or 2, but I'm unable to unmute you at this time. Our next speaker is Ron Hanson. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Morning, supervisors and the sheriff. My name is Ron Hanson. I'm with PAC, People Acting in Community Together. We've heard today, and we all know that at all retail facilities, mask coverings are required for entrance, and nearly all the time while you're in the establishment. We learned from the sheriff's office at a recent public safety and justice meeting that masks, however, are optional for deputies and correctional officers, especially in the jail. And this has been confirmed by those being held in our jails. Public health officers and our own public health officer agree that face masks are the primary means to control the spread of coronavirus. So we urge the sheriff's office and we'll hope that they will step up their game with respect to wearing masks, especially in the jails. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Wesley Mukuyama. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, Sheriff. This is Wes Mukuyama. Thank you for your comprehensive report. I really enjoyed listening to you. I have a very selfish question. I know you don't have a date for volunteer lay chaplains like myself to re-enter, but what strategy are you thinking of to eventually bring us back, if at all? I can understand that. And one last thing I'd like to recommend to your training is to train all of your personnel in meditation, how to meditate and be calm and clear before they go out. Thank you.
Wes, we'll ask the sheriff to give you a brief response after the public speaking is over. Next speaker, Colin?
We have no speakers in the queue.
Okay, did we know that Ms. Clifford had the actual call-in number? If she does, we can try to take her just in the spirit of public input after item 8, just to get her comments in, but maybe someone can make sure she has the correct number for call-in. Thank you. Sheriff, did you want to respond, if you have a response to Mr. Mukiyama's question about any strategy for getting lay ministry or chaplains back into the jails?
Yes, Wes, thank you. And thank you for what you've done for us for many, many years. We basically, our philosophy is we believe that one of the first things that should be done is visits with family members. I think that's something that's very, very critical to all inmates and the families. And if ever will we bring people back in? Absolutely. The services that are provided by our volunteers, and we have as many as 1,500 people who are cleared to come into the jail to provide services. And I know, Wes, you're one of the regulars. Absolutely. We need you. What you do is wonderful. Most of you do it on a volunteer basis. So I'm not ever saying the new normal. I believe that we're going to return to a system. I'm very optimistic with the healthcare system. I believe that we're going to return to where we can be as we were in the past and really provide a lot of critical services for inmates.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. I know you'll keep us posted. Thank you, everyone. I think that concludes item 7. And
Supervisor Cortese, I'm sorry to interrupt. Christine Clifford has logged in with a new number. I can give it one more shot.
Please do.
All right. Next speaker is Christine Clifford. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Hi, Christine, you are live. Christine, are you there?
Well, as I said, Colin, we'll be happy to take her after, I think after item 8 might be an appropriate time if she can hang in there and get back on.
Thank you very much.
We'll move to item 7 now. This is a report from the Department of Planning and Development relating to the continuity of services, once again, during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have Jacqueline Onciano with us, the planning director, and we'll turn it over to her. Oops, we need to get you unmuted, Ms. Onciano. There we go.
If I'm unmuted, I'm trying to get my screen up.
Your screen's up.
You guys can see it. I can't see what you can see right now.
We can see your screen, but not any slides or anything, but just your home screen.
Okay, I have it on. Let's see. I can't get it to come up. No, come on. It's here. Oh. Bring it here. But then can I move them? See if I move them. Can they see it? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present what the Planning and Development Department, the services that we are providing. We have been open for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been working remotely. We have currently 98 staff. All our staff are working remotely. We have been providing virtual services, and I apologize for my voice. We have been providing virtual services, and I'll go over the services we have been providing. When we are fully staffed, we are staffed at 120 employees. We have dedicated 4 employees to the contact tracing effort, and we have within our office, our essential employees consist of our permit center manager, 2 administrative personnel, our building official, and myself, the director. We have staff that rotate in from all of our divisions, from our planning division, building, code enforcement, administration, and finance. They rotate in to take care of services that they cannot provide remotely, and that is done not on a daily basis. That is done within the month, and it's on a rotating basis. From a planning standpoint, we provide all of the land use permit services, development services, and construction services. And we have worked to be compliant with the shelter-in-place orders that have been issued since March. The services we provide currently, I'll go over how we modified our services, but the services we normally provide are our public service counter, planning and our land use development services, construction, inspection, our code enforcement, which as you know, our code enforcement is complaint-based, so we respond based on complaints. So what we did, our transformation modernization program strategically put us in a place to be able to respond to this pandemic and to respond remotely. And so what we have been able to do is we have been able to stand up all of our services that we normally would provide in person in a virtual manner. So currently we are providing our virtual public counter service where people have the ability to make an appointment to actually chat with our planners, our plan checkers, environmental health is a part of that, and roads and airports. So based on the need of the applicant, we can stand up a virtual public chat where applicants can get information from the other agencies and from our agency. We have our online planning and building application process. This is already up. The public can go into our public portal. They can submit a request for information. They can access our building applications, our planning resubmittal applications. If they need an appointment, they can submit a request for an appointment and we will schedule those appointments accordingly. And then we have virtual inspections. Our building and code enforcement divisions have been conducting virtual inspections where they actually will use they'll walk through with the applicant with their phones for foundation inspections. And this works very well because, as you know, within our electronic devices, we have GPS coordinates. And so we can, they have the ability to look at exactly where the inspection is taking place to make sure that it lines up with the applications. We are also conducting public hearings. We've had planning commission hearings, zoning administrative hearings. We are scheduled to have ALUC, our Airport Land Use Commission hearings will be forthcoming. We did have a SIMPAC meeting. That's our San Martin Planning Advisory Committee. They conducted a virtual meeting. It was quite successful, where we had students from Cal Poly presenting a project to the residents, and we were able to have an exchange. So we're very pleased that we have been able to provide the services that we normally provide remotely. We are working to perfect our services, but I just want to give you a few stats of what we have been able to provide. We've hosted 62 virtual public counter consultations. We've taken in 70 new building permit applications, and we've issued 312 building permits, actual permits. And we've done all of this remotely. We've conducted approximately 5 to 7 building inspections per week. And I didn't have the exact specs or data for code enforcement, but our code enforcement division has consistently been conducting inspections. We have the proper PPEs in effect. We have over 1,000 masks. We have suited our building inspectors, their vehicles with masks and sanitation, the wipes and the hand sanitizers, and they have gloves in all of those vehicles. So when they go out on inspections, they do have the proper personal protective equipment to keep them safe. The next steps for us is we will continue to expand our electronic services because it's our intent to keep the public and our employees safe. We will follow the shelter-in-place orders. If we can continue to work remotely and provide efficient public services, that's our desire. My desire is to keep the staff working remotely as long as it is our position to be able to provide adequate services to the public and comply with the shelter-in-place order. We are monitoring the budgetary impacts regarding a decrease in revenue. There was a period when we first started our virtual services that the shelter-in-place order was very limited regarding construction services. As the orders began to change and the release of construction opportunities began to open, our services were matched and aligned with the shelter-in-place order. We are now fully operating, with the exception that we are still perfecting our ability to take in new planning applications, new land use applications. We are securing software to be able to perfect that, our next phase, which is our Excella 2.0 phase, which is a part of our transformation modernization program. And so we're also looking to prepare as needed, and this would be limited for future in-person services. We have to get in our the shields, and we're scheduled to establish 4 stations. We normally have 8 stations available to service the public. But I want to speak to one advancement that we have made, and that is we have 2 conference rooms for people who may not have electronic devices at home that would be conducive to a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting, where if they make an appointment, we will set up the ability for them to have the virtual consultations in the office. We're getting ready for that. We're excited about it because we recognize that everyone doesn't always have electronic devices, but it would allow the person to make an appointment, to come into our office, and to actually have a virtual consultation with the other agencies where people are not actually in the office. And so we're very excited about being able to provide that service. It is at an appointment only situation. However, I do want to say we are still servicing the public when they come in. We service them as long as they have masks and gloves, and then we sanitize the office once they leave. The essential workers that we currently have, as I stated earlier, is our permit center manager, 2 administrative personnel, the building official, and myself. We are here consistently, and we have been every day since the pandemic of March. I'm available for any questions. I hope you can hear me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
We heard you fine. Thank you very much for the very interesting overall report. In some ways, the new normal sounds like almost like advancement in in customer relations, given the fact that the department over the years has been moving to one-stop formats and group kinds of customer service between departments. So good to hear that you're making the most of it. Supervisor Chavez?
Thank you. I feel like that too. And actually, Jackie, one of the questions I'd be really interested in understanding is, of the changes that you're making, what will stay and expand? And in particular, I thought it was interesting about the virtual being able to do virtual tours, in some respects, I think it could actually address another problem we have, which is it seems very difficult to properly schedule multiple views of a particular property. So you have one person go out and then they give their opinion, and another person goes out and they give their opinion. And it seems that if you were able to do these remotely, that it may be easier to schedule all parties, do one loop through, and frankly, force us to reconcile on our end the different information we give folks. And I think that could improve both customer service, but also help us align our policies a bit better.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Chavez. That's a wonderful question. And yes, we're looking now at securing software that will allow us to expand our virtual inspections. Our new building official who joined us in April, Neville Pereira, is working diligently to review different software that will allow us to expand. And hopefully, it's my hope that we will be able to, I know this is not the new norm for everyone, but to continue to have our staff work remotely and perfect the virtual services. Like you said, if we can get everyone online and seeing the same thing where the public doesn't have to come in, it's just really been fantastic. We have what we call the applicants roundtable, and we had a virtual meeting, and some of our repeat users have stated that they appreciate being able to not have to drive into the office, but to be able to get people online immediately and have those chats and make those changes. So we're looking to expand our services. I've told the staff it's my desire to continue to keep everyone working remotely in accordance with our shelter in place. But it's most important that we provide adequate services and be efficient to the public. So we are going to expand our virtual services.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Chavez, anything else? Okay. In a similar vein, I kind of already made my comments, so kudos to you for, again, like we've said to others, turning on a dime here and getting things done, getting adjusted. It can be, I'm sure, like for the rest of us, a hardship and a blessing at the same time, as people get used to doing some of these things. I'm a big fan of preliminary reviews, as you know. When Supervisor Chavez and I were with the city of San Jose, there was nothing more challenging, it seemed like, in land use than to have constituents come, make appointments for our office only to say, oh, I went to the counter and they said this or they said that, and I'm not gonna be able to do my project, or I am going to be able to do my project, and we're thinking the opposite. How could you possibly be able to do that? And we moved years ago to, for a very small, modest fee, I shouldn't say small, modest fee, people could get a written preliminary review. So there was no he said, she said, whatever, however you want to put that. It was very clear, much like your slide right here. There would be bullet points. Look, if you're going to proceed, this is basically the path, and we can't guarantee what's going to happen because there's hearings, there's issues, the reports have to be generated, but you should know these are the things that you are most likely required to do, or it would just tell them, stop, do not proceed, you cannot even build a house in this area, or whatever the case may be. I would love to see, maybe you're already doing it with expanded virtual counter, but a virtual, giving somebody something like that and then being able to walk through that with them in a virtual way on Zoom or something, so they not only are reading it, but they're hearing it, the auditory at the same time. They can ask their questions. Does that mean I have to stop? No, that doesn't mean you have to stop. It just means it's a big, lengthy report you have to generate. these are things that I think would be really helpful on the front end, and it's not going to solve all the misunderstandings, because there always are a lot of misunderstandings in planning work, but just getting things as nailed down as possible on the front end like that.
I'd like to highlight the slide that I'm showing here. We have that situation right now. We're only doing 4 appointments a day, but we're working to have that chat that you're speaking about, maybe in 45-minute increments, where the applicant would actually get something in writing. So you see this slide, it shows that the applicant would either have a virtual public counter consultation or they'd come through our public portal. We have our permit techs and our planners who are looking at that information and either saying, yes, we need to set up a consultation where we have DEH and roads and airports and fire and planning available to talk to the applicant. And then the applicant has that ability to modify their plans, talk to people live. And then if their application can move forward, we would either set up a planning record or we would set up a development record, which is a plan check record. And then we would activate an actual planning file number or a development number, and the application would be accepted. Or if they need additional information, they would find out at that time when that chat is taking place. So we're working to perfect that, and I'm hoping you're going to hear good things from your constituents as we progress, because even when COVID is over, we're going to continue to offer these services and perfect them.
No looking back.
No looking back.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Did we have any public speakers calling on this item?
We do not have any speakers at this moment.
Okay, well, you're in luck, Director Anciano. The questions are over. Thank you very much for your good work and the comprehensive report. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll move on to item 8, which is a report from the Office of County Executive and Employee Services, ESA, in other words, relating to the strategic hiring freeze evaluation criteria and anticipated retirements and the projected impact on other post-employment benefits like OPEB. Lots of stuff there. And I'm not sure who's leading this. Maybe John Mills. Is that possible?
Yes, Chairperson Cortese, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, good afternoon. This is John Mills, Employee Services Agency Director. I do not have a lengthy presentation on the item. This item was placed on the agenda to address 2 specific questions that it's my understanding that Supervisor Chavez raised at the May 26th special meeting of the Board of Supervisors related to the budget. The first question was related to the hiring freeze and specifically the decision matrix that's used to consider freeze exemption requests. And just very briefly, the hiring freeze was instituted on April 10th. Exemptions to the hiring freeze are considered weekly by the Exemption Review Committee, which consists of representation from OBA, County Exec, and Employee Services Agency. Each request is reviewed on a case-by-case basis, taking into account a number of factors, including funding source, revenue generation potential, the role of the position in the pandemic response, service impact of not filling the position, and whether there is an internal or an external candidate pool. Specifically related to the question related to anticipated retirements and the possible impact on OPEB, we looked back at past data to assess this question, and we noticed a spike in OPEB enrollments following the dot-com bust and the Great Recession. A similar spike in the next few years could be ameliorated by the 15-year service requirement to vest in OPEB, which wasn't in place prior to the previous 2 spikes. And so projecting forward, at least over the next 2 fiscal years, we would anticipate a slower rate of increase in enrollment just based on that extended vesting requirement. And with just those brief overview comments, we're available to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Well, thank you. We'll go directly to Supervisor Chavez, as you said, who expressed a lot of interest in this item.
Thank you very much. If you could, John, I'm interested in understanding how you use the information you have to do an assessment of the number of people that you anticipate retiring in the next, year or two.
Well, what we did was we looked back historically and we extrapolated those historical trends to make a future projection, and also factored in the more recent historical impact of the 15-year vesting requirement, which has somewhat slowed the growth in OPEB enrollments.
So I'm not sure I see what you're saying. What you're saying is if you took a historical look, and I'm just wondering if there is any increase, and I'm kind of curious about this just based on COVID-19 and how close people are to retirement, and whether or not that has people making different decisions, just personal decisions relative to the situation we're in now that may look different than the past.
Well, that is an interesting question. And I guess sort of the COVID window might be considered to be, the most recent quarter that we're in. So one thing that I'm thinking we could do is we could look at, our retiree planning sessions, or, our enrollments in our retirement sessions where employees who are contemplating retirement come to get all of the information about retirement, and see if we've seen an uptick in the last few months in those numbers. That might give us a sense, to your question, if anyone's using the current circumstances to influence their future plans.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know. And that brings me to another question. So according to the ledge file, there are positions that are being held open and that are vacant, but some filled positions that will be cut. Does that sound right?
Well, at this point in time, from the perspective of the Exemption Review Committee, what we are just looking at are requests that departments have to fill vacant positions, and evaluating them based on the criteria that are referenced in the legislative file. We are, trying to be very judicious in those decisions, anticipating, to your point, that we may be faced, with starker options in the very near future. And so we want to be able to preserve the most alternatives for the county to be able to contend with a deteriorating budget situation. And some of those alternatives do certainly include being able to maintain open vacant positions that may be a landing spot for someone in a filled position that might be slated for deletion later, to be able to accommodate that individual.
So, got it. I guess the other thing I'm interested in, and I'm certain, I'm not certain we have the answer for it yet, but as we hire into positions, particularly I'm thinking about nurses and other health positions, and given the financial situation in the hospital, I'm curious about whether or not positions in the healthcare industry go into the category of positions that will pay for themselves.
Yes, well, and to your point, I mean, you do raise the question about whether or not positions in the healthcare category could be considered positions that will pay for themselves, given what we've seen, I'm sure our own health system has experienced, and what we've seen reported in the news about decreasing revenue to healthcare providers based on the decline in individuals, seeking routine care or elective procedures. We have been approaching the healthcare classifications to date based on the lens of role in the pandemic response. But I believe that as we take a closer look at the budget in terms of the second round of budget review that we're anticipating for the August timeframe, we are going to have to take a deeper look at the revenue forecast for the health system and the demand, not only from the pandemic response, but for other healthcare services, and see how we might be able to strike an appropriate balance based on whatever flexibility we have from existing vacant positions at that time.
Got it. And then one last question. I'm wondering, how long on average do employees use OPEB, the employees that do?
I don't know that the answer to that question off the top of my head. Of course, it's based on, actuarial analysis and, life expectancy. So depending on when they retire, through the remainder of their lives, sort of what that average time period is that they're subscribed to OPEB versus their Medicare eligibility.
Right.
So I'd have to take a look at that and give you a more clearer picture of those numbers.
And partly too why I'm asking is that I'm looking at the 17,800 retired county employees receiving benefits and 11,000 of them being eligible or currently enrolled in OPEB. And what I'm curious about is actual enrollment in OPEB relative to total in retirement. And because being eligible, and I understand that the eligibility puts us at risk for the expenditure, so I recognize that. But what I'm really interested in is the utilization relative to eligibility and relative to total retired population. And then the third question is the number of current retired employees relative to OPEB. And I'm interested in understanding whether or not the percentage of the total population of retired employees goes up in terms of OPEB usage or goes down. And if you think the actuary is the best way to see that, if you could just send the actuary to the board off agenda just for them to look at, that might just be easier than you trying to slice through all those questions.
Yes, absolutely. We can get you that information.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Dave.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
All right.
Sure.
I don't have any questions. Colin, do we have any speakers on this item? It looks like not.
There are no speakers currently.
And Christine Clifford is still unable to sign on, evidently.
Correct.
All right. Well, Christine, you can submit your question or concern or comment in writing, and the clerk will get it posted within the next 24 hours or so, if that's helpful. That brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Let me just say thank you to everyone. Let me say thank you to Supervisor Chavez, because although she thanked me at the beginning of this, the fact of the matter is most of the referrals within this meeting today were initiated by our board president, including the very idea that we should have this special meeting in the first place here at FGOC. And I was a little skeptical at first as to whether or not this would be a good use of time, considering all things, including how stretched everybody is, and the fact of the matter that we have been having a number of COVID hearings and updates. But I have to say that for me, this has been one of the best FGOC meetings I've ever been to in my 12 years, because I got a glimpse into how things are being operationalized, which I think was the whole point of FGOC, Government Operations Committee. I really got a glimpse of not only how things are being operationalized, but I feel like I got a little glimpse into the future as to what things are going to look like, just around the corner as we continue to emerge, from all the grief of the pandemic. So thank you all for blessing us with that look into your operations. gives me a great deal of comfort, and I think also some thoughts as to what we need to do as a Board of Supervisors to be ready to support you however we can in terms of the purse strings of the operation and the things that we control. So thank you, Supervisor Chavez. Thank you, everyone. And Cindy, do you have any final comments you wanted to make?
This was great, really informative. Thanks to all the staff.
Really informative. I actually got some text comments from constituents, unexpected. I don't think that ever happened to me at an FGOC meeting, saying how informative this is. So great job. And we'll see everybody for this committee combined with CSFC June 25th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. for a regularly scheduled meeting. Bye-bye. Have a happy virtual lunch.
Thank you.